Fantasy RPGs are usually some kind of power fantasy. This means that when you play, you're expected to gain dominance over the world. The characters you fight and play as in these games are larger than life, often getting to the point where only gods could stop them. That's part of the fun, and I think that's a perfectly valid way to play the game. And not in a, oh, it's valid, but I think you eventually have to come to my idea, but more in a, I think you could play a game like that forever and always have fun. If you're happy with that kind of story, this video may not be for you. But it might be. We'll see. Have you seen that new Superman movie? No. How about The Incredibles or Captain America Civil War? These are stories that are at least partly about the role superheroes play in a real society with a real US government. The Incredibles is all about how superpowered vigilantes needed to be outlawed for people to live peacefully. Captain America Civil War is all about how an unfortunate event leads people to question who watches the superheroes when they make mistakes. The new Superman movie is really about optimism and kindness in a pessimistic and cynical world, but there's an aspect of that movie where the world is concerned that Superman just flew into a world leader's home, took him out of it, and had a chat with him. Sure, the guy is genuinely evil, but even if I was the nicest president of Peaceland, I wouldn't like the implication that if I do something to piss Superman off, he can just do that to me. Now, back to our fantasy RPGs. Do you see what I see? Oftentimes in fantasy RPG adventures, you have a group of people who meet in a random location of the GM's choosing, grab a couple of weapons off their backs, and in about a year or two, they become larger-than-life heroes, destined to kill gods. Yet the government of these worlds never seem to care. Why is that? Well, I'm not sure, but the hypothesis I have is that it would radically challenge the players and their assumptions about adventuring and heroism. This sounds interesting in your head, but I worry that if you were an actual player in that game, you'd feel pretty miserable. Imagine having to constantly fight the government about which dungeons you're allowed to go into. Better yet, imagine saving a village from goblins and they respond not in adoration, but fear, constant fear, that if you can do what you do to the goblins, what stops you from doing that to the citizens? Building these kinds of games requires players who actually enjoy being challenged at all sides like that. People who don't mind being villains in the eyes of the public when they know what they're doing is right. Now, let's say you happen to have a group like that, and let's say you're actually trying to run this thing. What are the most important aspects of the fantasy RPG experience we can actively question? How do we question them in interesting ways? Well, I basically think fantasy RPGs come down to 3 core narrative assumptions. Freedom is good, the group is more powerful than the individual, and good actions are rewarded. Which means we would need to run a campaign where the opposite seems to be true in the world. Where the world believes conformity is good, the individual is more powerful than the group, and bad actions are rewarded, right? No, that's wrong. Having the world believe the opposite just makes the PCs heroes in a different way. It's not that the world should believe the opposite things, it's that the core narrative pillars we laid out are met with deep skepticism. Basically, we need to present a world where freedom can be its own chains, the group insulates you from others, and what actions are rewarded and punished is purely luck. Remember when I said this didn't sound like much fun? Well, we're this far into the thought experiment already, so let's explore the tropes of fantasy RPGs and try to make it a skeptical hellscape. For fun. Freedom is not just a core tenet of the fantasy RPG, it's a core tenet of the liberal world. Tackling what freedom means and some of the less fun aspects of it is questioning some of the core assumptions of the modern Western world. So it's a little tough to do without feeling like the campaign is overtly political. But we're the ones who decided the campaign world had to mean something, so, well, let's just make it political. While I offer some options here to make freedom feel a bit less attractive, there's a ton of history of political philosophers who are asked to question the freedom that liberalism provided. You could always just steal from them. One of the things that makes independence a mess in terms of governance is that free people don't have an obvious tie to their community. If you live under somebody, you often have them or the community to fall back on. Conversely, when you're independent, you often only have the people you chose to fall back on. This means that being free can be a very isolating experience, where missteps are even worse because you have no one to help you when you fall. When we're looking to subvert the narrative around adventuring, we need to tackle this idea that the PCs are isolated and largely have no safety nets. Often, they're far from their home and their family. This makes it worse when bad things happen to them. They have few people to back them up. This means we can make bad situations far worse. We can even provide avenues for the players to recover, but then they might think that joining up with a guild might be a good idea. Cyberpunk explores a similar idea with options for the characters to pick up a health card that they break to get treatment. Sure, you now have some insurance that you'll be alright, but what you have to sacrifice to get that card can be pretty nasty, even if you somehow just buy it yourself. Without a safety net, we can ratchet up the stakes and put the characters in difficult to escape situations, which would be easier with some sort of oversight. Your independence is even spookier when you consider your lack of accountability that other organizations have, making the group seem suspicious to the general public. Sure, you might improve the way that the public perceives you when you save them from goblins in a traditional game, but remember what we said earlier, with the authorities being suspicious over the powerful heroes? Well, I want you to imagine yourself a fantasy NPC. You own a farm and a house. Occasionally, goblins come into town and steal a girl. This is distressing. You hope it's not your daughter, but it's ultimately something you've come to expect. People try to stay in their homes at night and avoid getting close to the place where the goblins live. Easy. Not perfect, but you reach some kind of harmony that way. Then a bunch of adventurers show up, and they hear about your problems. They're kind of scary with their big weapons and armor, and they might just kill all of the goblins. These people eventually, after a week or so, kill them. Great. You don't have to worry about those goblins anymore. Yet, something tickles the back of your head, a thought you'd never had before. If these people can take care of a pack of goblins in a week, what could they do to my village, to my family? This should be a depowering moment for your players. Even their good actions are sometimes met with negative feedback. Their heroism works like a weight on their shoulders, a burden. Why? Because they are free to do what they like with no oversight. The villagers may be mildly reassured that you're a good person now, but how long can that last? Will someone convince the people to fight against you in the future? These are important ideas to keep in mind as the PCs go from town to town without any accountability for their mistakes, if they let people know about those mistakes in the first place. In spite of the issues presented here, even if we would want to restrict some of the freedoms that adventurers have, it would be wrong to pretend that those restrictions would stop them from being heroes. The regulations on their lifestyle would still allow them some degree of safety, but here's the thing. Given what adventurers do, they often aren't allowed to be free unless they fight for it. This is something that is a fantasy trope, but we can still subvert it for our own needs. If all the people in the world are asking the PCs to conform to their logic and their way of life, and the PCs decide that they do not want to conform, they want to keep going into dark dungeons and fighting evil monsters, they are going to get some pushback. Not just from the people in the world, but the government as well. Keeping dangerous locations like that open to some group of commoners to handle, rather than some local law enforcement group, seems like a mighty gamble. You can have situations where it costs more to fight for freedom than to conform and be a farmer. Your players and their characters have to decide to be heroes in spite of the bad things that might happen to them. That way, they know that when the going gets hard, they're building the muscles to struggle against it. Similarly, if you want to build a dilemma, have the players be free, but at the cost of someone else's freedom. Maybe someone they care about, maybe someone they don't, but have them wrestle with that question. Have them question if the job of adventuring is something they really want to pursue, or if it's just something that appeals to them. Have them think, maybe it's worth it to settle down as an adventurer and take the easy route in life. That question may be the motivation for some excellent roleplay. The players learn and feel that protecting their freedom is going to cost more than simply conforming. Given we've been talking about regulation, one of the biggest regulatory bodies available to your adventuring party is the party itself. You have a group of friends and colleagues who can help you fight against those who are trying to make the world worse. This might start off as a necessity, but eventually you become friends and maybe even family with these people. They are important to you and you to them. This is a key part of the adventuring experience, finding people of different backgrounds and working together with them for some common goal. This provides the player characters a sense of community with the others and forges bonds. This is something that if we intend to subvert, we need to do it with a deft hand. You shouldn't look at just trying to break the group. That would be frustrating to the point of being annoying. Instead, you should make the group look unattractive compared to working alone. Let's talk about some interesting ways to do that. The easiest thing to mention here is that the group requires individuals to sacrifice their own interest for the sake of other group members. While this is almost always true, we're fighting against a lot of forces encouraging the group to stay together. Characters are almost always safer in a group. The group covers up areas they're weak in, and the group can fight things that an individual wouldn't be able to, like a Hydra or a Shadow. That said, we can still offer our characters things that they want to pull them away from the group. Make an opportunity to gain power or otherwise have a player get what they want. You give them the option to get that thing, but they have to leave the group for a while. There might be some incentives that work better for one player compared to another: magic items, information, even revenge. Sidebar: I played a guy who lost his family because of a corporation working with terrorists to scratch off a number on a sheet. When he and I learned that, my game master was smart and offered me the option of taking a spaceship out and fighting those guys, but it would jeopardize my contract with the crew. Suddenly, there's a lot of questions to be asked. Is vengeance the right thing for my character right now? Can they navigate their rage enough to be calmed down? Those were the thoughts in my head, along with the normal thoughts of if I should just play ball so no one would have to worry about where their healer is going after all of this. It was a wicked bit of role-playing, and while I wasn't sure I made the right decision for my character, I thought that confusion and self-questioning would help bring them more to life over the course of the game. Now that the sidebar is over, it's time for you to think about what your players really want. Think about ways to give it to them, at the cost of their affiliation with the party. Once they're informed about it, watch them squirm to decide what to do with that information. They'll suddenly know the power they have as an individual to leave the group. A big piece of advice people tend to give for these kinds of games is to give characters distinct arcs they go through over the course of an adventure. If everyone gets a spot in the sun, then it's easy to integrate backstories, learn more about characters, and eventually reach the point that everyone's personal issues are resolved and they're ready for the big bad at the end. This is good advice for a traditional D&D game, but we are not running a traditional game. We can still use the advice though. We need to show the players that being in a group means they are less versatile, since they, as a group, can only focus on one conflict at a time. Provide your players with 3 character-focused conflicts that are occurring at the same time and are somewhat urgent. Make them resolve it in about a month or so, with important checkpoints throughout the month that have the situation getting worse. At the end of that month, your villains will have succeeded, and the quest will be failed. You present all of those to your players at the same time. They'll have to have a discussion about which issue is more important. This means conflict, drama. I think you should let the players deliberate for some time on this, and try to make each of the 3 issues equally catastrophic. One person's hometown could have people getting sick from a strange plague no doctor can fix. One person's coven could be under attack from a group of neighboring bandits, and someone's noble house could be infiltrated by spies. Each of these will spell complete destruction for their home, and thus is equally important. This will give the players a lot of questions to ask themselves. Most importantly, it'll show them the weaknesses of working in such a tight group, since they have nearly no way of handling more than one problem at a time. Being in the group means you can't split your attention, and that makes people wonder if they want to move on their own. A solution to the issues above is getting fellow adventurers involved and having them help you. Maybe you could even form a guild of adventurers and have them help you out when your attention is pulled in multiple directions. The problem with starting a group like that is you suddenly become a faction, and being a faction means that other factions will not like you. Why is that a problem? Well, those factions can be other adventurer guilds or even the government. If the PCs don't build a guild like this, they're still slowly becoming their own faction in the world. They're getting powerful enough to fight gods by the end of the game. People will start to notice that. While that happens, the other factions in the world are going to notice that and start trying to ensure the PCs don't gather too much power on their own. This is going to cause large-scale conflicts, some that may challenge the PCs as a group. If everyone starts to fight against them, then what's the purpose of staying together? Their unity is being challenged directly. It's the heart of what people are concerned about. You suddenly have enough power to change the world, start a revolution. No one can have that. The PCs have to wonder at some point if it's all worth it. Was drawing the ire of the Empire worth it when the Emperor sends his elite troops to kill your friends? Was that really what you were signing up for? A terrible purpose? A life with these kinds of choices? This is one where you can make the bad guys blatantly evil, and I think it still holds up. You just have to focus on the right things. Have NPCs the PCs care about in the front lines, fighting against some bad guy. Give them no option, which is easy. Have them roll dice to determine if someone they cared about died. Have them visit their families. Have them give eulogies at their funerals. Have them eat dinner later. A cold soup in front of a cold fireplace. Then have it happen again and again, until they're just wondering if it was worth it to keep their unity for the sake of all they lost. As long as we believe we're doing the right thing, we can justify anything. Often, fantasy stories work to reward the characters for doing the right thing. Their good actions are rewarded with good things. They might gain favor, earn money, or even simply find better tools, which all reinforce the idea that the characters are doing the right thing. When we twist that for our stories, we shouldn't stop rewarding players. That would be a little insane. Instead, we should make it clear that rewards are random and have little to do with the actions that preceded them. We can do this by having the PC's good actions be met with skepticism by the normal townsfolk. We talked about the goblin attack before, which is a good start, but let's try another strategy. Given the amount of wealth the PCs have access to, they believe the best thing to do would be opening an orphanage for children in need. Their impact on the town would grow beyond them. The PCs leave the town for other adventuring things. Then you bring them back to that town and reveal that the orphanage has been replaced by a gambling hall. When the PCs eventually ask the town why, the folks state that they cared more about entertainment than they cared about the orphanage. They were suspicious of the PCs trying to build the thing anyway, so they decided to make it their own. The world took an action the PCs did as charity, in good faith, and responded with indifference. I'd be careful about doing something like that a lot, considering we want the PCs to be unsure which actions are rewarded, which are punished, and which are undone by the narrative. This lack of footing will make the PCs skeptical of the world themselves, and cause them to be unsure if they should be doing anything at all, let alone the right thing. This is done by just occasionally having those good faith actions interpreted negatively by the world and the other characters. This can also be fostered by having two NPCs perform nearly the exact same action and be rewarded for it in different ways. As always, circumstances change, so the two situations will never be completely alike, but you could easily do something like having two noble sons work hard, go to war, and come back victorious, with only one of the sons offered the throne. You could have a cleric heal a town, and a witch heal another town of the same plague. The cleric is venerated, but the witch is burned. This further builds skepticism with the world your players inhabit. Combined with the last piece of advice, they may be paranoid given the strange way people interpret their actions, and the way being someone born differently can affect how the world perceives good actions. Clerics are inspirations, witches are dangerous, knights are honorable, mercenaries are greedy. The King's Guard upholds order. Adventurers bring chaos. I would advise primarily doing this with NPCs, but you could do it with other adventuring groups, or even within the same group. You can imagine that even if a rogue kills a monster, that the townsfolk might sooner thank the paladin for leading them. People of different stations are treated differently. Make that real by having the same actions have different consequences. I've been using a couple allusions to evil empires and dark forces in the background. This is because these are common tropes of a fantasy RPG. You always want your players to know who to point their sword against, so you make an evil emperor and his evil lieutenants, and you call it a day. This does not properly question the core tenets of the fantasy story. We don't want easy answers, we want something that makes the players think. There should be good and bad people in positions of power. You can still have some villains this way, and you could get morally gray people in there too, but I think it's key to know that the people at the top are engaging with their citizens in good faith. You can have the PCs be harassed by a nobleman's paladins, and it causes enough of a ruckus for the nobleman to notice them. They bring them to their house for a dinner. It's dark, the wind is blowing, thunder roars behind them as they enter the darksome manor. The halls filled with the dim light of torches and the scent of wood varnish. Upon finally arriving, the gaunt nobleman lifts up a thin, bony hand to shake theirs. They say, "We're having problems, let's solve them." Then, have them genuinely try to solve the problem. Negotiate legitimately. They still want things too, but they don't want to seem unreasonable. Your adventurers are citizens to them. Then, after the PCs have met 2 or 3 good or reasonable noblemen, they then meet a bad nobleman, who the citizens like a lot. Eventually, you'll be in the spot where the PCs know that good and bad people work in politics, but even the bad people legitimately believe what they're doing is right. This should make the PCs consider how they can change the political situation to remove bad actors and encourage good ones to rise up, if that's even something they want to do at that point. With good and bad people holding power, your players will struggle to determine the right method of changing the world. Now, I've given a lot of tools to subvert a standard fantasy story. I want to take a moment to talk about why you would even do that, considering it can be pretty hostile to the player characters and might even make the game difficult to play at times. One thing that's been pretty popular as of late are cozy games. Games that aren't really trying to make a super important point most of the time, but trying to build a relaxing experience for the player. There's also, in my estimations, been a lot of stories which end in a way where the players seem to have nothing that really challenges them or forces them to reconcile with the actions they've taken. While this has infected the TTRPG space a little, I think a bigger thing is that a lot of GM advice seems to be geared toward this general sentiment of removing barriers in the story that make it harder for people to do the right thing. You reward players a lot for fighting evil monsters and saving townsfolk. Not just mechanically, but narratively too. People trust characters more when they've saved their town. Heroes defeat a bad guy and everyone rejoices. These are nice stories to tell ourselves. Reassure ourselves that our hearts are in a good place and that good will triumph over evil. I want to be clear, these stories are also important. Yet, I think their popularity is robbing us a little of letting our players be true heroes. To me, the greatest moments of heroism from stories I love are when the world has given the hero every reason to back down. My favorite heroes look for another way. They reject the world and its assumptions entirely to fight for what's right. They don't get rewarded for it. They're not even really happy about it, but they know for sure that they've done the right thing. So sure, a lot of these suggestions are really mean, and I probably wouldn't put them all in the same game at once, but I wanted to provide some opposition to that cozy narrative and to easy answers. I want you to make the players be heroes when it'd be much easier to do nothing.